We begin today with news on State Police Bill. The Nigerian Senate yesterday passed for further constitutional processing President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's State Police Bill 2026. At the heart of the proposed constitutional amendment is the creation of state police services alongside a restructured federal police service, which will replace the Nigeria Police Force. The upper chamber also passed the Nigeria Police Trust Fund Bill 2026. Senate leader Opeyemi Bamidele, who led the debate on the bill, said it represented one of the most important reforms in Nigeria's democratic evolution, while Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu hailed Tinubu, describing him as a champion of true federalism. Meanwhile, in Enugu State, Governor Peter Mbah has said there is no more hiding place for criminals, as his administration has built the capacity to preempt, track down, and bring them to book. Mbah sounded the warning on Wednesday during the commissioning of the Center for DNA Forensics and Criminal Investigation.
Moving on, the Nigeria Sanctions Committee has welcomed the decision by the U.S. Office of Foreign Assets Control to designate Mukhtar Mohamed Adamu and two bureau de change firms linked to him over alleged terrorism financing activities. The committee says America's sanction follows Nigeria's inclusion of Adamu and other money exchange firms on its sanctions list, published on June 18. The federal government has directed all financial institutions to comply fully with sanctions obligations, including asset freezing and reporting suspicious transactions to relevant authorities. As the fight to curb terrorism financing continues, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, will bring to court the national president of Miyetti Allah, Abdullahi Bello Bodejo, over alleged terrorism financing and money laundering worth more than $2.5 million. Meanwhile, a high court in Sokoto has sentenced 3 men to be hanged for terrorism and arms trafficking. The convicts are Yusuf Mohammed, a Nigerian, Jabi Alhaji Yale, and Kabiru Mohammed. They were arrested in June last year by counter-terrorism officers over cross-border arms trafficking and terrorism.
The African Democratic Congress, ADC, has dismissed concerns over the silence of the former Rivers State Governor, Rotimi Amechi, insisting that he remain the party's vice presidential candidate for the 2027 general elections. ADC National Publicity Secretary Bolaji Abdullahi said there was no crisis within the party and that Amechi was under no obligation to publicly announce that his acceptance of the nomination alongside the party's presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar. In the People's Democratic Party, the leadership crisis escalated on Wednesday as 2 rival factions separately presented certificates of return and nomination documents to their candidates for the 2027 general elections. Each of the factions insisted that it was the party's legitimate leadership and expressed confidence that the Independent National Electoral Commission will recognize its nominees. Ayo?
Right, a lot to talk about this morning on insecurity. State police gaining a lot of momentum, especially as it's now been passed in Senate. I think it's important to mention at this point that there are still a few hurdles to get through. Number one is that it has to get through 2/3 of the state houses of assembly. It has to be passed in 2/3 of the state houses of assembly. I think that brings about 18. I believe states have to pass it. And then, of course, the process of operationalizing it, some of the conditions which were given under this bill, which is that each state must obtain a certificate of standardization, having met certain thresholds to determine whether or not they are ready to take on state policing on board, fully on board. In the interim, we have a federal police that would still be in place and would still be adequately funded, as we've seen the state police fund, trust fund being also the term limit taken off. But of course, a few concerns still exist. So if I move on to those concerns, let me just say that the move or the push for state police has been heard across different channels, across different experts, security experts who have promoted this. Recall that this particular bill was first promoted by Senator Ike Ekweremadu. He had sponsored this bill, and this has been a conversation that's been ongoing for a while. Now, with the state of insecurity in the country, the President Tinubu administration has thought it important, pertinent, urgent to ensure that they're able to have this structure in place, especially as they have been able to dimension that insecurity is local. And a lot of times, a local response or a more decentralized response to insecurity would be more efficient as opposed to what we currently have, which is the federal system. Hence, the promotion of state police. What this means is that The state would be responsible largely for the recruitment of its police officers. The state governors would have more influence and control of the police officers with an oversight function from the state houses of assembly. And this is seen as a welcome development. Yesterday, I had said that some state governors in the north, north central, had said that if only they had they had control of police, they would be able to fish out the bandits and terrorists in their towns, in their cities within a matter of weeks, because they understood the terrain. They had understanding of the local community. They would work with some of these people, the traditional leaders, and so the federal government was too far removed from what was happening in the state to be able to have a full grasp of security on ground. Now, having said that, there are a few other things that must be put into consideration, which, if not properly handled, might meet some bottlenecks or some resistance in these states. The President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the APC government having, control of, in terms of their governors, in a number of states would mean that there's a likelihood that they would gain that 2/3 majority. Very likely, and it might happen soon rather than later. However, the concerns still remain around the influence and the powers that the federal police would still have. For instance, some of the areas I noted with regards to their influence would be even when they would need to intervene or take over from state police. And they said where there is a total breakdown of law and order. And what this makes me remember is the Rivers situation, when a state of emergency was declared, and it was said that there would be a potential breakdown of law and order. Hence, there was they put a military, an administrator, a temporary administrator in the state. The argument still exists as to the justification of what was seen as an aberration of democratic processes. How will this be checked with state police? Who will determine? Because in this provision, the president would write to the Senate, give a requisite notice. But then this might not all go well with a lot of state governors, because it is still somehow having that much influence, even though you're now saying that they're in charge of recruitment and other things. Even the recruitment is down to a lot of oversight function from the National Assembly. So to what extent, even though the governors have been given this authority, this control over state police, to what extent would they be almost babied and controlled still by the federal? These are concerns that must be addressed in order to have a full, the spirit of state police. But in the essence of that, as part of the efforts and the move to tackle insecurity, which has become a national emergency, a number of experts have opined that this is a move in the right direction. Another regard is that they've said they put in safeguards to ensure that no politician will be able to use it for their own personal political gain, ensuring that it cannot be used for partisan reasons, it cannot be used for sectional or personal reasons. And this is not a matter of just the provisions of the law. It is a cultural and institutional behavior that must be addressed, because there are a number of safeguards that have been put in place to prevent, for oversight functions. We have the Assembly, National Assembly, but if they don't live up to their work, the state houses of assembly, many of them are under the control of their executive. Many of these state houses of assembly are rubber stamped. I mean, recall that one of the House of Assembly members in Lagos State here said that they asked him to sign a document. He didn't even go through the details of the document. He just signed because he heard a directive from up above. So how would we ensure that we strengthen these institutions who would act as checks and balances to ensure that state police really, works in the spirit of things? But moving on from that, I go on to the ADC crisis, but unfortunately, I don't have enough time for that. But the only thing I'd say is that Rotimi Amaechi, Right Honourable Rotimi Amaechi, has not yet come out to say categorically that he has accepted to run as vice to Atiku Abubakar. We'll continue to keep our eye on this. Rufai, your take on these stories.
Okay. So I laid my hands on some of the things they did in the Senate yesterday, and I'll read a particular section here. I think it was section 20, the part 1 of the third schedule, as the principal act has altered, where they were talking about the National Police Council shall comprise of the following members: a chairman to be appointed by President subject to confirmation by the National Assembly, Attorney General of the Federation, the serving police officer not below the rank of Deputy Inspector, the Attorney General of each state, 6 retired officers, each of geopolitical zones to be appointed by the presidency, 1 representative of the National Human Rights Commission, 1 representative of the National Public Commission, 1 representative of the National Labour Congress to be nominated by the president, a representative of the Nigerian Bar Association to be nominated by the president, secretary to the council to be nominated by the president. As long as you have this, there's no accountability. And this is the bill. This is what they reenacted yesterday. If it's still the president top heavy, it's as good as having federal police that has a state police inkling. That's just it. So it's still pretty much overseen by the federal. And even when you look at the, police council, it's still leaning towards the president. You see, my fear is, when we talk about federalism, I think we don't understand what federalism is in this country. We don't understand what federalism is to a large extent. And when you still have this modeling, it's just going to open doors for all sorts. So if this is what they did yesterday in the National Assembly, and I can read all the sections, maybe what I'll do is as the days go by, I'll be reading different sections and be pointing the loopholes. If this was what they did, and this is what will also be sent to the State House of Assembly, which I know those ones will, largely want to counter since their governors are already in on it, then it still goes back to the things we're talking about. I think the true conversation, and why I've always been iffy about state police, is the viability. Because the reason for the level of insecurity in this country is not because of state police. State police is just saying you have more jurisdictional boots on the ground, but it doesn't solve the problem of complicity. It doesn't solve the problem of complicity. I mean, we've tried the iterations with various local policing arrangements, Amotekun and the likes and all of that. So has it been able to solve the problem?
But they are not armed.
No, they are. They are giving intelligence and some guns, but they are not giving AK-47 and high-grade weapons. I mean, that's just the difference. So if you give them an high-grade weapon and all that, I mean, what does it do? They work in consonance with the police. Okay, you give them the right to go all out. Does it solve the problem overnight? Where you have a massive level of kidnapping, insecurity, complicity. Look at the high-level terrorist financing you're seeing. Look at how much these guys are transferring in international border transfers for terrorism. You want to compare it with what would be the paltry budget of the state police? Where they are even talking about a 3% quota because the governors, which we know, that cannot even pay anything, will not be able to pay and effectively cater to it. So let's solve the problem of security architecture first. Let the politicians allow the security architecture in this country breathe. Because do you think this will stop the politicians from still going to do peace deals with the bandits? Is it not in this country that the security architecture is so defeated to an extent that people were motorcycles passing? Anyway, the police have come out and say, no, they are vigilante. I don't know when police started giving salute to vigilante. I don't know when police started giving salute to vigilante. And they carry such sophisticated weapons. Because you see, in this country, they think all of us are just daft, that we have no brain. So vigilante will be passing on motorcycle. Police will see them, police will be waving, oh, vigilante, go ahead. And they carry very good. I could swear that I saw an RPG somewhere in that video, maybe, but it was pixelated, maybe I didn't see it well, oh. So please correct me if I'm wrong. So when did police start bowing and saying, hello, happy to vigilante? You see, we live in a mess. We live in a mess. And this mess has been largely caused by our political class because of their own selfishness. All of these guys, trace it back. It goes back to politics, in the bid of trying to win elections. You arm people that you're not supposed to arm just because you want to win office at that point in time. Then you lead it to the proliferation of arms. So I can still read through what they did yesterday. It's still top heavy. You put the police council strictly in the hands of the president. He's the one that nominates people from the labor group. He's the one that nominates people from civil society. You put them there. In the states, the governor will do whatever they want to do. You say you're having an overriding. So if the president has a police council and one of his governor boys, let me use that word, yes, because some of the governors have become his boys. If one of his governor boys are on the right side, or he wants them to help them do something in the states, the same police council will not judge and say the state police has done wrong. It's the police council that they're supposed to provide oversight. They will leave it and let it be. So these are some of the bottlenecks. Although some people say, and they argue that it's the beginning of devolution of power through federalism. I don't think so. If we truly want to have devolution of power, the powers of the president should be whittled down. That's where we are going. The Nigerian president has so much powers, overarching powers. A functional democracy should never have a president that has this much powers. So if the president, and I don't think President Tinubu will sign to whittle down his own powers tremendously.
All right, Dr. Mati.
Let's start with state police. Already described appropriately as one of the major constitutional reform of the security system architecture in Nigeria being embarked upon by the Tinubu administration. So it falls within the basket of reforms. And it will be, as it were, a correction of the Unification Decree number 34 of 1966 under the Aguiyi-Ironsi administration. Now, what has been done now is that the Senate, the National Assembly, yesterday at plenary, or what is otherwise called a joint meeting of the whole committee, decided on 26 clauses in the alteration bill of the 1999 Constitution. And some of the sections that the National Assembly considered, one after the other, will include Section 121, Section 129, Section 84, dealing with nomenclature, Section 117, Section 201, Section 202, Section 214, Section 216, Section 318, and also alterations to the second, the third schedules, and also the fifth schedule. And the cumulative effect of this is change of nomenclature, and also to provide guardrails in terms of the effectuation of the state police, and also funding, which they did with the Police Trust Fund Bill repeal and reenactment bill. Now, this is the first step in the process. The second step will be, remaining faithful to Section 9 of the 1999 Constitution, which will require, within its provision, 2/3 of the state houses of assembly also following up and ratifying the decisions that have been taken by the National Assembly. So that's that in terms of the theory of what was done yesterday. But the major challenge will be in looking at the optics. Now, this National Assembly has behaved as if it has exclusive knowledge of what should be done with regard to state police. There was no public hearing. We had requested on this table that the 75-page proposal by the Nigeria Police Force, as it was known, should also be subjected to public scrutiny, and there should be an input from the Nigerian people. So the Senate, the National Assembly, has behaved as if it has exclusive wisdom in this matter. I have not heard the voices of civil society, of concerned stakeholders in this decision that the National Assembly has arrived at. So in terms of optics, that doesn't look good. Now, also yesterday, it was as if the process needed to be supervised by representatives of government. Some governors were there to witness the occasion. Attorney generals of at least 3 states from the Southwest were there, and there was a debate as to whether these persons should be allowed to be part of the process or not. At the end of the day, a compromise was reached. However, the thing to note is that National Assembly proceedings can be observed. That's why they have a gallery by people from the general society. Now, to move beyond theory to practice is now the issue. Now, we were told by the Senate leader, Senator Okoyemi Bamidele, that some safeguards have been put into those sections that I quoted earlier, to the extent that state governors will not be allowed to abuse the process, either for religious reasons or any partisan reasons or on the grounds of political difference. How are they going to enforce that? There was also some talk about the Police Trust Fund, which would be in place for 6 years. Now, what is the guarantee that that trust fund will be funded? Who is going to fund the Police Trust Fund? And also, these governors, perhaps, this may well be the opportunity for us to revisit the issue of security votes. Nobody knows how the security vote is spent. So is there going to be a provision eventually that state governors should use security vote for the purpose of running police issues? Again, the third sticking point is the National Assembly now saying that the federal government will still be in charge of terrorism and can intervene whenever the president so decides. That sounds like giving authority to the state governors and also taking it back with another hand. To the extent that every crime is local, I do not think that you will say, terrorism should be handled solely by the federal government or cyber crime or whatever. Most of these issues are committed in the states, and the states will need power. The state governors should not, under any circumstance, have to refer to the federal government. Now, the nomenclature Nigerian police force has been changed to Federal Police Service Commission. And some commentators have praised this to show that this is a move towards federalism. If it is a move towards federalism, then the 3 tiers of government should be involved. The federal, the state, and also local governments. And these, of course, as we all know, are local governments that are not functioning. But what they are talking about is a dual policing structure. So where does that leave the state governments? And then the other issue, of course, will be about how you build the structure. In the proposal by the Inspector General of Police, he had talked about a 60-40 arrangement. In other words, that the federal police will have about 60% of the persons who will be posted to the states. Who is working out the logistics? Finally, on state police, it seems to me that, yes, while we said it's an idea that we can try and all that, there will be uneven results. Some states may be prepared. And those states that may be prepared are likely to come from the southern part of the country. I don't think that it is all the states, north and south, that will immediately jump on the bandwagon and say they are ready. There will be varying issues in terms of the level of preparedness among the states. And so you have some states that already have some structures in place going forward, and then some states not even measuring up. But the whole idea is to decentralize policing in Nigeria and to ensure that many of our ungoverned spaces are now covered and there will be security. The test of it will be in the movement to theory to practice, from law to implementation. Enacting a law is not enough, as we have seen in this country. It is about what you implement and how that works out. Now, what is the other issue? Miyetti Allah chief being arraigned for money laundering. There's nobody that is above the law. The allegation by the DSS, Department of State Security, and I think EFCC, is that, he didn't pass some transactions with the Bauchi State government through the system, and that in itself is a violation of the Money Laundering Prohibition Act of 2011, as amended, I think, 2022. So, if that is the case, they will have to establish that he has a case to answer. But in doing so, his rights must also be respected. And the media must desist, as it is want to do, from media trial and jumping to conclusions. Every man that is, charged to court and arraigned or whatever has rights under sections 35 and 36 of the 1999 Constitution, both of which talk about fair hearing. So he should have his day in court and he should be allowed his rights under the law. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.